Well, good morning, YouTube. All right, guys, in today's project, we have another will it start. It's cold out here, guys. You know, I started to film this a few moments ago, and right when I picked up the phone to record, Nick from VLOX 18 Trucking, Towing and Recovery Service, I don't know what he's going to call it now, but anyway, him and I had a good 10-minute conversation, and during that conversation, holding my phone to my ear, my fingers started to freeze. So I went and grabbed some gloves. Hopefully I can still work in them. All right, so behind me here, we have this Ford F550. It has a 7.3 POWERSTROKE engine in it, just like the Excursion over here has. So it's a great engine. However, Joe asked me to see if we can get it running because it's been sitting here since about 2019, maybe even 2018. Not real sure on the exact date, and I don't think he is either. This is actually my third day out here, not full days by any means, but my third time coming out here to work on it. The first time, obviously, the batteries were dead. So I set the chargers on it and tried to get the batteries charged up. And while I was doing that, I just cleaned all the garbage out of it. The same guys are driving this truck that were driving my Kenworth before I bought it. And if you guys remember the Kenworth series, they were slobs, man. They just left all kinds of trash in there. I filled the garbage bag full of just junk that was in here. Anyway, after all day and well into the evening of the batteries being on charge, we turned the key and nothing happened, just dead battery. So day two, I go up to the local parts store where Joe has an account. I get some good interstate batteries for it, come over here, put them in and go to try to start it, and it turns over, but it won't fire. So it's not getting any fuel. I opened up the fuel drain on the float bowl and nothing came out. I tried to cycle the key a number of times to try to get the system to prime, and with that drain still open, nothing came out. So no fuel is reaching the engine. The fuel gauge says there's a quarter of a tank, but that doesn't mean anything. We've had issues up here with thieves coming up and stealing the fuel out of stuff. So I don't know that the gauge is accurate, but it's a good possibility that someone stole all the fuel out of it, or maybe it's leaked down somewhere. So today I picked up 5 gallons of fuel in a can. We're gonna pour some in there. We're gonna see if we can get this thing to fire up. Unfortunately, I don't think it's gonna matter. Now, he said that it was running rough. When it comes to diesels, you can usually tell if you've got a major compression loss when you're turning the engine over. So all that turning over and it not starting the other day, I could hear the consistency in the way it turned over, that I have a really strong suspicion that we have a cylinder with a lack of compression. Now, typically when you start a diesel truck, you get there, and then it fires up, right? However, when you've got a cylinder that is lacking compression, usually the way it turns over, you're gonna get more of a rummer. I know, funny sound effect, right? But anyway, so that's what it was doing. So I don't have hopes of it running really well when it does fire up. Joe thought it might have been an electrical problem, but at this point it's not running. So this is just the engine turning over and the sound of the starter and it hitting that weak spot in the engine. So even if everything else is good, there's a good chance we're gonna have to rebuild the engine in this in the very near future if we can get it to run at all. So anyway, I'm gonna set you guys up and show you what it was doing, and then we'll go pour the diesel in and try it again. All right, guys, there you go. You can see our brand new batteries in there, but please take note, these cables, look at that corrosion in there. Yeah, we're gonna have to replace the cables as well, but that'll come probably while we've got the engine out. These cables aren't much better over here. So guys, hopefully you can hear that. Definitely not the cadence that this engine should have when it's turning over. Now keep in mind, I am a certified technician on motorcycles, not diesel trucks. However, my very first diesel was a 7.3. It's the engine that made me fall in love with diesels. They're great engines. I'm self-taught. Because I have been a certified technician for more than 30 years on motorcycles with some common sense and learning the new style engine, I'm pretty competent with working on these engines. Not a guru, don't know it all, obviously, but I've had my share of wrench time in them and diagnosing and so on and so forth. I'm pretty confident that that is a sign of low compression on the cylinder. Now, it does sound like the batteries are getting a little weak again because I've tried starting this numerous times without any luck. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and flip my excursion around real quick. I'm gonna hook the jumper cables up to it, let the battery start charging a little bit while I start dumping the fuel in there, and we'll see if we can get it to fire up. But also, just take note of the way mine sounds when it starts, and you'll hear the difference. Well, I'm back. All right, guys, you didn't get to see that, but after I pulled the truck up here to put the jumper cables on, I realized that I didn't have the jumper cables with me. I had taken them out of the excursion to put them into the dually when we took the trip to New York to get the tractor. So I had to run back to the house, grab the cables. But there we go, we're hooked up. So we're gonna put some fuel in this. We're gonna try to cycle the key a couple of times, see if we can get the fuel pump to pick it up and send it to the engine. Well, guys, be glad that I did not make you sit around and watch me the entire time I poured that diesel in there. You know, because of the angle, I still couldn't get it all in there the way the bed came out. So there's still probably about, I don't know, maybe half a gallon or so left in that can. But those stupid nozzles on these gas cans nowadays, it took like 11 minutes to pour 4.5 gallons of fuel into this truck. And the fill tube is almost horizontal before it goes into the tank because of the shape of that flatbed that's on it. So I couldn't pour it too fast anyways, otherwise it just spilled back out. But what a pain in the butt. All right, so now I'm gonna go cycle the key a couple of times. I'm gonna try to see if it'll pick up fuel and prime the fuel bowl up here on the top. I think I'm gonna leave the drain open so I can see when it's getting fuel, and that way if there is any contaminants in there, maybe it'll push them out before we send them to the injectors. Well, guys, the plot thickens. So I have cycled this key on and off probably 15, 20 times with the fuel bowl drain open. In theory, I should have seen fuel coming out. So I was starting to think that it was a fuel delivery problem. I climbed underneath the truck because keep in mind with my truck over here running, I couldn't hear the lift pump, whether it was operating or not. So I turned on the key really quick. I got on the ground, crawled underneath the truck, put my hand up on it, and sure enough, I can feel the lift pump running. I can slightly hear it once I'm down there. So I was starting to think, well, maybe it's just a bad pump and it can't actually get it there, or maybe there's no fuel in it. Now, fuel gauge seems to be working because I added that 4.5 gallons of fuel and we have come up above 1/4 of a tank now. So it did register the fuel reading, so I don't think it was a fuel in the tank problem. So I thought to myself, well, maybe just the drain is plugged or something like that. So I'll go ahead and try to start it anyways. And it turned over and turned over and turned over, would not fire. But of course the batteries are up, so it turned over a whole lot faster. So then I decided to pull the fuel filter out of the fuel bowl. And the fuel filter looks absolutely perfect, like it's brand spanking new. But lo and behold, when I pulled the filter out of the fuel bowl, it was halfway full of fuel. And so then I was like, well, wait a minute. If it's got fuel in it at all, it should have drained when I had that valve open, and it didn't. So I went back in and I turned the ignition back to the on position. With the fuel filter removed from the fuel bowl, I cycled the ignition key to the on position again, ran back over and looked, and sure enough, it was filling the bowl, starting to overflow it, so I shut the key back off again. So it's not a fuel delivery problem, so now we got to move to the next step. As even the fuel in the bowl looks remarkably clean. So I think the next step is I'm going to go check the fuse box. I'm going to make sure that there isn't a blown fuel to the IDM. And for those of you who don't know, the IDM is the injector driver module. That is what actually controls the fuel injectors on the 7.3. So if it's not powered up or working right or properly grounded, it's not going to tell the injectors to fire. The other thing it could be is low high pressure oil. Well, it's not throwing any codes, but at the moment I don't have a scan tool to plug into it to read it. I think I've got one at the house, but I think there's a wiring problem with it. So they can at least come back and I can verify that the injector driver module does have proper communication, as well as I can probably run an injector test. Well, I got the fuel filter put back in the fuel bowl. Unfortunately, without the drain working, there's no way to drain it. So as I put the filter in, it obviously overflowed. But most of that is run off of the back of the valley now. I think before I do anything, I'm gonna try one more time to start it. Maybe for some reason we have some kind of an airlock in there. Doesn't sound logical to me, but sometimes weird things happen. So we'll try it one more time. All right, guys, well, obviously that didn't work. So my next step, like I said, is we're gonna check fuses and relays. When I was cleaning the truck out the other day, the owner's manual is still in there, so at least I can look up which fuses and relays go to what circuit. And I do have my power probe with me in the Excursion. So that'll be the first thing I check. The second thing, which I don't think is likely, is for those of you that aren't familiar with the 7.3s, they have an under valve cover wire harness that goes through the glow plugs and the injectors. And there's a plug that actually plugs into the valve cover gasket that transfers power from outside of the engine to the inside of the engine. And those are known on these trucks for coming undone. If you remember, I had a video last year where I had the same issue with the Excursion and I used a little quarter trick to fix it so they don't come undone. The reason I don't think that's the problem is, unless both of them are unplugged, it would still want to try to run. It would run terrible if it started, but even if 4 cylinders were trying to fire, I'd hear something. I'd hear it want to fire. So that's why I don't really think that's the problem. I'm not saying it couldn't be a problem, but it's not likely that that is the problem, or at least not the only problem. Another thing these engines are known for is the cam sensor going bad. And if I'm not mistaken, I have one in the glove box of this truck. So worst comes to worst, we can always give that a try. But I think fuses are the first step. As I said a moment ago, this isn't an HEUI system, and what that means is the fuel injectors actually get their driver power for the solenoids by high pressure oil. So there's 2 components really that play a big role in that, and one is the low pressure oil pump that feeds the reservoir for the high pressure oil pump, and I've pretty much verified that that's good. During cranking on the dash, the gauge is reading very good oil pressure, so I don't think it's a low pressure oil pump problem. But once the oil is put into that reservoir, the high pressure pump takes over and it pumps it out to the injector rails, and it's regulated by the IPR. So there could be a bad IPR valve, could be a bad ICP sensor, which tells the computer what the pressure is in that fuel rail. So it could be a high pressure oil problem as well. And the easiest way to diagnose that to start with is to plug into a computer and read to see if any of the sensors are bad. We are not getting a check engine light, but these things don't always show check engine lights. So I remember I toggled with a bad high pressure oil pump once on this, and there were no check engine lights whatsoever, but it would barely run. And when it did run, it was really low on power until it just quit altogether. All right, so let's attack those fuses first. I just love it when people keep all their paperwork in their books in the vehicle. All right, guys, I just heard a traffic accident while I was recording. I go check, make sure everybody is okay. Did not sound good. Tire screeching and then bam. Well, guys, stayed over there with them till fire rescue and stuff got there, but it's not good. It looks like Mama with the 2 kids pulled out from the stop sign right in front of that pickup truck in her minivan. And they hit pretty hard and spun her around. She's out walking around. She says she's pretty sore. She hurts. Looks like the kids are just scared. I don't think they got hurt, luckily. But everyone's walking away from it at least. So, yeah, just be careful out there. You know, and another thing that I think is kind of unlikely but possible is it is really cold out today. It could be the glow plug's not activating properly. So it's not getting enough heat in there for this cold of a start, especially when an engine is sat as long as this. You know, had it run yesterday, probably not such a big deal, but I know that even with mine that's in good running condition, Sometimes when it's really cold, it's challenging to get it to fire up. You know what? I changed my mind on that, because on mine, when it's hard to fire up when it's cold and the glow plugs aren't really doing their thing, I still get the white smoke out of the exhaust, and I'm not getting that here at all, which means fuel is not being delivered inside the cylinder. So probably not that. But this is just my thought process. So I've checked all of the under hood fuses and everything is good except for one. There's a 7.5 amp fuse, but it's just for the trailer tow brake and left and right turn signal relays. So that's not going to contribute to this problem. Well, I ended up going down a rabbit hole chasing the glow plug theory, and I don't have any power to the glow plugs. I've got power to the relay, but not coming out of the relay to the glow plugs. Something is not activating the relay. But even when I force it to activate, it's still not sending power to the glow plugs themselves. So you can see here with key on, I've got power. That's the glow plug relay. This is the intake air heater relay right here. You can see, got power. And as you can see, I've got power there as well. I have power to the primary side on both units. Now with the key on, I have power here, so that's grounding, but still no power here. On this one, also no power here, but you see it's not going, well, now it's actually going through. A minute ago it wasn't, so I've jarred that one loose, but still no power transferring to the output. These wires here go down to the actual glow plugs. This wire here just runs right up this way to the intake air heater. But like I said, for a moment, neither one of those relays were activating. At this point, I can probably get them to switch on and off, but they weren't. It took me a little while before I was able to self-ground the relay and get it to click and, you know, audibly click. But no power going through, both of those relays are probably bad. That could contribute to the hard start. So I think what I'm going to do here is a test, because I don't have any jumpers here heavy enough gauge to run those. When I try to use the power probe to supply power to both of those circuits, it trips the circuit breaker within the power probe. But I've got my jumper cables here hooked to my truck. So I think I'm going to put both clamps on the positive cable, and then I'll put one of each clamp on the other end to one of each of those relays. That will give power to both the intake air heater and to the glow plugs. I'll go inside. We'll see if we can get it to fire up. Got both cables hooked to the positive battery terminal there. And then over here, one to each. Power. And power. Let's go give it a try. And we have a negative on that. All right, looks like I had a bad connection. We're trying one more time. Well, unfortunately, there's nothing worse than starting a will it start video with the hopes of getting something started, but then at the end of the day, having to walk away without hearing that engine run. So in summary, we have multiple problems because all the fuses are good, but yet there's still no activity at the fuel injectors, but there's also no power going to the glow plugs or the intake air heater as well. So we have multiple problems, but I really don't think those are the reasons it's not running. Because like I said, we would get the smoke out of the tailpipe if it was trying to dump fuel into the cylinder still. On top of having bad compression on a cylinder, or at least one cylinder. But I think at this point, the next logical step will be to hook up the scan tool and do a proper electronic diagnosis, rather than just going through and trying to change out parts and sensors and so on and so forth until we narrow it down. So I'm gonna go home and see if I can't find my scan tool, and if not, I'll see if I can borrow one from a friend. But it's starting to get dark out here. It's definitely getting colder, and Katie's called me to come home for dinner. And there's one thing I don't like being called, and that's late for dinner. We also have a business meeting tonight, like a conference call at about 8:30. So I want to go home, get cleaned up for that. So this is going to have to wait for another day. So I hate to disappoint you guys. I know I'm disappointed, but it is what it is, and it doesn't always work out the way we hope it will. So guys, thank you for watching. Until the next time I see you, keep those engines running, or whatever we can do to get these started. If you guys have any ideas, leave a comment down below. What do you think the problem is?